All right, so welcome to another video on the channel. This time we have to go a little bit back in the past.
I said everyone got.
And I would like to present to you the beautiful E92 335i. So, as some of you may know, on the channel there is an E36. I traded straight up the E36 for this 335i. One of the reasons was that this has a freshly done engine. This is a European spec manual, no sunroof, that will be transformed into a track car. I had a situation with a guy on the track, and he was, let me just put it like this, kind of laughing at my E46 330 Ci with his E92 M3, and I've made it my goal to take a lesser BMW than his E92 M3 and to challenge him at the track. So anyways, it's going to be a track build. We're going to be taking this bog standard car, which is quite the surprise nowadays, and we're going to be kicking it up a notch for it to become a competent track car. As some of you may know, the E92 n54 engines do like to get hot, so we have to take that into control with a nice intercooler, radiator, oil cooler, and such type of upgrades, maybe a thermostat and so that it can actually maintain. But overall, as a platform, I think it's a fantastic platform. This car looks bog standard from the outside, however the inside has been redone. As you can see, we have some very nice E92 M3 cloth seats, which do look beautiful. And then we have, of course, a M Sport shift knob, some basic stuffs, a steering wheel, and that's pretty much it. I honestly don't think that the car needs anything more, to be completely honest. I think they represent some amazing value to be had at this price point. Here currently in Europe, these go anywhere between like 12, 13 to 20,000 euros, depending on specs and mods. But in this particular example, I think it's a nice case because it has had no crash history whatsoever. And yeah, I think it's super fun. And one of the reasons that I'm such a big fan of the E92 chassis is its controllability. Of course, it's never gonna be as good as a E36. So let me just pop it in to traction control off. And then the beauty of it is, if you have a nice drift spot like here, you can just do your S's. Of course, the car has been warmed, etc., etc., but it really is a nice example of a fully controllable car. I just have it in gear, second gear, and boom, you can do this, and then it just slides. And then we do a reverse, and that's, I mean, without the differential, so it's actually quite controllable all considered, which, I mean, honestly speaking, with an open diff, this is a lot of fun that could be had. So I'm a big fan of this chassis from that perspective. Let's take it for a spin. In any case, I think the chassis itself is really good and competent, but before we talk about that, with the magic of editing, I would like to tell you that from the outside this car looks absolutely horrid. I mean, it's bog standard non-M Sport. It's just the thing of nightmares, honestly speaking, and it's one of the reasons why I think Bangle wasn't so popular. But nevertheless, we're gonna spruce it a little bit up with some nice rims. The actual factory M Sport, which funnily enough can still be bought for reasonable cheap from BMW Direct, so that's always a benefit instead of looking for used parts, aka my 996 turbo. So from that perspective, I think this is gonna be a lot of fun. If you're interested in the acceleration, take a look at the video on the top right, but nevertheless, it really pulls. I mean, the conditions, as you can see, are not the best, and of course, we can't go too fast. It's a public road at the end of the day, but nevertheless, the torque is there. Funnily enough, if I compare this to my old E92 M3, it's feel-wise, I mean, it's obvious, the torque, right? But feeling-wise, the M3 had nothing below like 4,000, 3,500 RPM. It was really, really slow. Whereas here, like the moment you put in, of course, there's some noticeable turbo lag, but once it spools up, the turbos do their thing. The one thing, however, I'm really not a big fan of the fact that the cooling is not in check. Like, we're driving right now a little bit faster than normal, but nothing crazy, and already with our oil temperature, we're at 110 degrees centigrade, which is way too much for what we're doing right now, because normally you would have anywhere between, I don't know, 70, 90, 80. but definitely not this much. And just the controllability of the chassis again. Right hand turn, accelerator, and it just goes, and it's a lot of fun. So I'm really curious where we will get to, because I need to beat that guy at the track, and that's the whole point of this car, honestly speaking. So I'm really curious how close we'll get without doing anything stupid, because at the end of the day, the intercooler, like the cooling is a must. Then we will increase the power a little bit. I'm aiming for the Series 1M, 330, 350-ish horsepower, something along those lines. Again, we don't want to go too crazy, because at the end of the day, the more heat we will produce, then, you know, it kind of negates the whole purpose of the tune. So we want to make sure that that's done in check. So there's a few companies here in Europe that do intercoolers. I mean, it's not the typical CSF like in the US. In Europe, it's Do88 is one of the companies, or Do from Sweden, and then there's another one from Holland called Mazzelman. They do very nice kits for a oil thermostat as well as an oil cooler that supposedly increases significantly the cooling capacity of the n54. And then afterwards, luckily with this engine, which thankfully consumes no oil, I think we'll be pretty much good to go. It just feels so agile. I mean, for better or for worse, for me, I know everybody is a big fan of the E46 platform, but for me it's either sort of E36 or it's E90, because the E46 feels like a compromise of the two cars in many ways, like design-wise as well. Like the E36 is raw, it feels like a quote-unquote DTM race car built correctly and so on. It's just a different raw feeling, whereas the E46 takes a lot of that rawness, it puts on insulation or isolation and removes a lot of NVH, thus basically negating that. And of course, it's not a sports car, it's not a 911, it's not a Miata and so on, but nevertheless it feels bulky. Here you feel that as well, but on top of all of that, you get that amazing chassis as opposed to the E46. And as well, like if you're not getting a fully loaded car, the weight is not that bad, and with the 335 you really do get a lot of power for your money. And so who's going to scoff at like 300 plus horsepower for that amount of money? It's really good. So thank you very much for watching this first installment. Please hit subscribe. The series upcoming, so we already have the parts on order. So wishing everybody a fantastic remainder of the day.